Hello all. This video we'll be looking at chapter 2, lesson 2, that's about conditional statements. Now in the previous video we did learn about inductive reasoning. So in this lesson we'll be looking at conditional statements. Yes, this is something new, so let's go through first what do these conditional statements mean. Now, as you can see, these are the three things we are going to be dealing in this lesson with. So a conditional statement is a statement that can be written in the form if P, then Q. Now, P and Q represent two situations. What are the two situations? If something happens, definitely there will be a result of something, right? So, like if definitely there is a reaction, there is an reaction for every action. So that's what the conditional statements say. If something happens, so P is something that happens, then Q will happen. So if you study well, then you will score good marks. If you fail, you will stay in the same grade. This is what a conditional statement means. So it can be written in the form if P then Q. So you can see that by using symbols we write it in this form P then Q. Using a Venn diagram, now these kinds of diagrams are called as Venn diagrams. You will have P that's inside and Q outside. So the if P, that's the first thing. If something happens, then the bigger thing will happen. That's what they literally mean. Okay, so this is conditional statement, which can be written in the form if P, then Q. Now, this conditional statement has two parts. That's the hypothesis and the conclusion. Now, conclusion, by the word, you can understand conclusion means the end of something, right? So if something happened, what will be the end of it? The hypothesis is what if this happens? This is hypothesis. Something which we think will happen is hypothesis, which we could predict will happen. So hypothesis is the part P of a conditional statement following the word if. Hypothesis follows the word if. And conclusion is what will happen if this happens. That's what the lesson is going to be about. Now that's going to be an interesting lesson because you're going to be looking at many different things, many facts and many different kinds of things. So first let's look at an example how to write the conditional statement, how to find the hypothesis and the conclusion of a conditional statement. So here we have a number is an integer if it is a natural number. So this is a conditional statement. You can see that there is the word if. So a number is an integer if it is a natural number. Now, as I said, hypothesis means if this happens, what will happen? So from this itself, you can find out what is the hypothesis. So hypothesis follows the word if. See, it's given already. So hypothesis follows the word if means your hypothesis needs to start from here. If it is a natural number. But what are we talking about? The sentence talks about a number. So if you would just write if it is, then you definitely nobody will understand what is it or what is that. So instead of saying it, we say a number because the sentence talks about numbers. So a number is a natural number. So this is where your hypothesis starts. Rather, the it one, we replace that with what the sentence is talking about. So a natural number is a natural number. So what if a number is a natural number? That's the conclusion. What will happen at the end? So at the end, what will happen is it is an integer. The number is an integer. It's easy, just needs some practice, that's all. So that was how to write a conditional statement. That's how to find the hypothesis and the conclusion. This next example, we have to write a conditional statement. Now, as I said, this one inside becomes P and this becomes Q. So this is the hypothesis, what if, and this becomes the conclusion. If this happens, this will happen. So how are you going to write the conditional statement for this? This is how you are going to write. If an animal is a tarantula, because we are writing the conditional statement. So if, it starts with if. If an animal, definitely the picture is talking about animals, right? So if an animal is a tarantula, then it is a spider. So if P, then Q. So if an animal is a tarantula, then it's a spider. It's easy. This is how a conditional statement should be. So let's try to write for this. Two angles that are complementary are acute. How do you think you're going to write the conditional statement for this? Let's start with the word if. Okay. If, then what's going to be the next one? if two angles, so we say if two angles are complementary, then they are acute. Simple, you just need to replace the words if and then in the sentence and write the conditional statement. So if two angles are complementary, then what will happen? Then they are acute. So this is how you write a conditional statement. Now the more we start doing the questions, the more you will understand how to do the questions. So this is going to be your practice homework answers as well as discussing the answers. We will also look on how to write the answers. So you have to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of each conditional. So the question says, if you see the stars, then it is night. So if you see the stars, then it is night. What is the hypothesis of this? So the hypothesis means something which you could do if. So if you can see the stars. So hypothesis is you can see the stars. So if you can see the stars, what is the result of that? Or what will happen if you can see the stars? Then it is night. So the conclusion is, it is night. Okay. Now that's because hypothesis always follows the word if. Now sometimes they might give you hypothesis like the word if in the middle of the sentence, but then you need to differentiate between those two. Here they have given it first, so if is first. So this is going to be the hypothesis because all this hypothesis follows the word if. So if you can see the stars, so this becomes the hypothesis, then it is night. And look at question number 2. A pencil writes well if it is sharp. So the word if is in between here, in the middle. So which is going to be the hypothesis? Definitely your hypothesis is going to be this because always hypothesis follows the word if. So it is sharp, but what's the sentence talking about? We cannot just simply say it is sharp because anyone might wonder what is it. So the question talks about a pencil. So we replace the word it with a pencil is sharp. So what will happen if a pencil is sharp? It writes well. So the conclusion is it writes well, or you could even write the pencil writes well. No problem about the words, but then you need to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion correctly. So always remember, you need to have the word if, and the hypothesis follows the word if always, whether it is in the beginning or at the center. It doesn't matter, but always it follows the word if. Okay. So let's move on to question number 3 and 4. You have to write the conditional statement for these questions. So let's write the conditional statement. 3 non-collinear points determine a plane. So how are you going to write the conditional statements for this? Simple, just write the words if and complete the sentence. If 3 non-collinear points, or we have to write the sentence correctly. So you have to say if 3 points are non-collinear. If 3 points are non-collinear, because that the sentence need to be put into perfect grammar. So if 3 points are non-collinear, then, because you're writing a conditional statement, so you have to use the word if and then. So if 3 points are non-collinear, then what will happen? Then they determine a plane. This is how you write a conditional statement. If this kind of statements are given, you must insert the word if and then to write a conditional statement. So if 3 points are non-collinear, what if I would have written if 3 non-collinear points? That won't make sense. If I would have written if 3 non-collinear points, then they determine a plane, will not make any sense. So we need to rearrange the sentence in such a way that it would make sense. So if 3 points are non-collinear, then they determine a plane. Right. Now, when I started explanation, I did tell you this is going to be the hypothesis, the smaller circle, and this is going to be the conclusion. So the figure itself is talking about fruits, right? So how are you going to write the conditional statement? Now you have to say your sentence will start with the word if. So the figure is talking about kumquat. So kumquat is a fruit, so that's what they said. So if kumquat is fruit, so then what will happen? So we need to write the conditional statement for this. So you cannot simply say if kumquat is a fruit, then it is a fruit. That doesn't make sense, right? So if a food, because fruits and all these things come under one category, that's a food. So if a food is a kumquat, then it is a fruit. It is a fruit. So as I said, you need to like sensibly form the sentence. You cannot simply say, now we know that the figure talks about fruit, so I cannot say if a fruit is a kumquat, then it's a fruit. That won't make any sense. So we need to replace the word fruit with a food. So if a food is a kumquat, then it is a fruit. Right, so let's move on to the next one. Now determine if each conditional is true. Now they have given us the conditional statements and we have to say if it is true or false. If it is false, we need to give a counter example. I think in the previous lesson we already discussed what's counter example. Counter example is a fact or a number, a figure, anything which will prove that the statement is false. This is a counter example. So let's see whether this is true or false. If 2 points are non-collinear, then a right triangle contains one obtuse angle. So the question says if 2 points are non-collinear. So you can say non-collinear means they are not in the straight line, right? Then a right triangle contains one obtuse angle. This is a true statement. All right, so the next one. If a liquid is water, then it is composed of hydrogen and oxygen. So this is more like chemistry, so you need to know the compounds of water. So water is all like called H2O, that's because of hydrogen and oxygen. So if a liquid is water, then yes, it is composed of hydrogen and oxygen. So this is true as well. Okay, so the next one here. If a living thing is green, then it is a plant. So do you think every living thing which is green is a plant? No, it's not. It's false. Why is it false? Because then if it's false, you need to give a counter example. Now this is the example I am giving because that's what comes to my mind. We could say a frog is a living thing and it's green. So we can give this counter example. So it's totally up to you what counter example you want to give. So a frog is a living thing and is green. So it is not a plant. So you could take any examples of the color green, anything which would give you a green color, and then you can give a counter example here. Totally up to you. I got this thing in a frog in my mind, so I'm writing this. A frog is a living thing and is green. Is missing here. You can use any other counter example. And now counter examples doesn't necessarily need to be only in words. You can use figures, you can use pictures, you can use numbers, anything you want. So if you want to draw a frog also, you can do. Okay, so question number 8. If G is at 4, then GH is 3. So first let me show you where is G. G is at 4. So this is 4. So according to the question, this is going to be G. Then GH, so the distance between G and H is 3. We know that. So if G is at 4, then the distance of GH is going to be 3. So write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the statement. Now what is the converse statement? Converse statement is we are going to flip this sentence. That's all. We are going to bring the conclusion in front and hypothesis behind. So if I would change that, that's going to be if GH is 3, then G is at 4. So this is how you write a converse statement. You bring the conclusion in front. Let me write it down here. In converse, you bring the conclusion in front and the hypothesis behind. So now we need to find the truth value of each. So we are going to find out whether the statement which we wrote now is true or false. So if it's false, definitely we need to say why it's false. So if GH, the distance between GH is 3, then G is at 4. Is this statement true? Do you think if the distance between GH is 3, then G is only going to be at 4? It's false. Why is it false? That's because G could be here also. If so the distance is 3, 1, 2, 3. So even if GH was here, 3, so it's going to be 1, 2, 3. Even if G was at -2, then the distance between GH is going to be 4. So it's not necessary that G should only be at 4 for the distance to be 3. Even if G is at -2, the distance is going to be 4. So that's a false statement. Now let's write the inverse. Inverse means, I think from the word itself you can understand what's inverse. Inverse means you're going to use the word not. So from the original sentence, which is the conditional, we are going to just add the word not. So we could say, if G is not at 4, then GH is not 3. Okay, so this is how you just insert the word not. So when you're writing the inverse, just add the word not in the sentence in 2 places. In the hypothesis as well as the conclusion, you will add not in both the places. So if G is not at 4, so G, if the sentence is G can be anywhere, then GH is not 3. So do you think if G is not at 4, GH is not going to be 3? Again, this definition statement is a false statement. You need to think very deeply to analyze whether it's true or false. So if G is not at 4, so say for example it's at 5, then GH is not 3. So definitely GH is not going to be 3. So no, but that's a false statement. That's not a true statement. Okay, now let's write the contrapositive of that. So what's the contrapositive of this statement? The contrapositive is we are going to flip the inverse statement now, which means we are going to bring this in front and we are going to take the hypothesis behind. So contrapositive is also going to be with the word not. So if GH is not 3, then G is not at 4. So this is how you're going to write the contrapositive. For contrapositive, you're going to flip the inverse statement. So when you flip, it becomes if GH is not 3, then G is not at 4. Now let's analyze the truth value of the statement. If GH is not 3, then G is not at 4. Is that going to be true? Yes, it is true, because if G is not at 4, then definitely GH is not going to be 3. So this is how you analyze the truth statements for these statements which they ask you to write for converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Well, it does take some practice, and definitely you need to analyze the sentences very carefully to find out whether it is true or false. Now, they did not tell us give a counter example, so we are just writing it's true or false, that's all. Right, so here this chart shows a small part of the mammalia class of animals, the mammals. Write a conditional to describe the relationship between each given pair. So the figure is talking about the mammals. So mammals are divided into 2, the rodents and the primates. So under primates, again, we have lemurs and apes. So here they're asking us to write the conditional to describe the primates and mammals. So how are you going to write the conditional for this? Definitely it starts with the word if. So the whole thing is talking about animals, because when we are writing that the conditional, we need to consider what the figure whole is talking about. So we could say if an animal is okay, so if an animal is a primate, then it is a mammal. Because you're writing conditionals, it's easy. So this is how you describe the relationship between a primate and mammal. So if an animal is a primate, then it is a mammal. The next one, lemurs and rodents. So how are you going to describe the relationship between lemurs and rodents? Now you could see that they are in two different circles, which means they are mammals, but they are in two different groups. So how are you going to write this? If an animal is a lemur, then it is not a rodent. Why are we using the word not a rodent? Because you can see that they are in two different circles. They are not together. Only the apes, the primates, and the lemurs are like mammals are divided into two parts. That's rodents and primates. Now, under primates, also we have the lemurs and the apes. So lemur cannot be a rodent. Okay, so that's why we say if an animal is a lemur, then it is not a rodent, because rodent cannot be a lemur, but they both are mammals. But a lemur cannot be a rodent. Rodent and apes. And now they're telling you to describe the connection between rodents and apes. Now, as well, you can see again, they're in two different circles, which means rodents cannot be primates, and definitely, so that means they're not apes also. So how are you going to write the conditional statement for this? If an animal is a rodent, then it is not an ape. Of course it's not. How funny will that be if a rodent becomes an ape? It's not an ape. An ape. Now definitely you know what are rodents and what are apes. So apes are monkeys and rodents are like the rat or the mouse-like creatures. So definitely a monkey or the ape, the big one of monkey, cannot become a rodent. Definitely not. It cannot become a mouse, right? A rat. Okay, the next is between apes and mammals. Okay, here you go. So apes and mammals. Now you can see both of them are mammals. I mean, ape is a mammal, right? That's why they have been in the same square. So both of them are talking about apes. Both of them are talking about mammals. But now you have to describe the relationship between apes and mammals. So how are you going to describe this relationship? So definitely you will have to start with the word if an animal is an ape, then it is a mammal. It is a mammal. Because if it's an ape, definitely it's a mammal. Even rodent is a mammal, but a rodent cannot be an ape and a lemur cannot be an ape. I hope you know what are lemurs. I think you have studied these in. Okay, so this is how you needed to write them. Now, I just wanted to share this thing with you because I want you to have a clear idea of these different animals, because then the conditional statements which we wrote becomes easier. Now, this is a lemur. Okay, it is a mammal. This is a lemur. It's a mammal, but as you could see in the picture, I mean in the question which we had, a lemur cannot be a rodent. And what is a rodent? Rodent, as I said, is the ones. Let me show you first all these. So this is a lemur, keep this in mind. These are apes, the kinds of monkeys, these big ones, okay, ape, the monkeys. The rodents are these, the mice, and these, anything which is of these kinds. So this is called a rodent. Okay, so these three are the ones which you have been, they have given you in the question. So now I'm showing that to make this clear. Now all of them are mammals, but they are divided into rodents, that's the rat kind, and the primates. So the primates are the lemurs, that's that animal which you saw now, and the apes, which are the monkeys. So these two come under one category, that's the primates, and rodents are in another category, that's the rat. But they all are mammals. So if you would understand this, definitely you will understand how to write these. So hopefully you have understood this lesson. If you have understood and if you have got the answers right, do like the video and let me know how many of you got the answers right. Comment and let me know. Right, so till we meet again, all what I could say is keep practicing, and for this lesson especially, you need to think logically, so think logically too. So till we meet in the next video, keep practicing.